So most people wake up in the morning and they start thinking about their problems.
Yeah.
And those problems are memories that are tattooed in the brain that are associated with certain people and things at certain times and places. Their brain is going to associate that emotion to a past event.
To a memory.
To a memory.
Yeah.
That's because they have nothing to look forward to in their future. So if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, it just means to me that you're more in love with your past than you are with the future. So how do you teach people to believe in a future that they can't see or experience with their senses yet, but they've thought about enough times in their mind that their brain is literally changed to look like the event has already occurred? The latest research in neuroscience says that's absolutely possible. We know that. And how do you teach a person to select a new possibility in their future and begin to emotionally embrace that future before it's made manifest to such a degree that their body, as their unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and they're signaling new genes and new ways ahead of the environment. Now, till their body begins to change to look like the event has already occurred. We've proven that that's possible. So your body is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment. Now think about this. The stronger the emotion you feel from some condition in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain freezes an image and takes a snapshot. And that memory now is embossed in the brain. It's branded in there. So then people think neurologically within the circuits of those past experiences, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And the stronger the betrayal, the stronger the trauma, the more the body's living in the past, right? So how do you reverse that? So now, if you truly got passionate about a future, we've all done this. You get a wild idea in your mind and you start holding on to that vision and you're preoccupied with it. All of a sudden, the thought in your mind becomes the experience and you start feeling the energy of the future. Yeah. Now, the stronger the emotion you feel from that vision, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind, and now you're remembering your future. In fact, I'm more connected to the energy of my future than I am to the energy of my past. I'm believing in my future more than I'm believing in my past. In fact, I'm more in love with my future than I am with my past. And I want to keep telling you the story of the future.
I'm more in love with my future than the story of my past. But most of us tell the story of our past in a negative sense on how it's held us back. Millions of times over our life, as opposed to the story of the future of what we want to create or who we want to become.
Yeah, listen, again, you tell that story, and the latest research on memory says that memory is creative. That in fact, 50% of that story you embellish. People make up that story. Let me tell you why they make up that story. Because they excuse themselves for the fact that they haven't been able to change since that event. They'll have to make it sound worse than it really was.
Make it harder to grow and change.
So that they can reaffirm their limited sense of their inability to change. So then that story becomes more and more of a story, and it's less of the truth, because you got to work yourself up into a state. There were lions and tigers, and there was, there were helicopters,
snowstorms, and
everybody was firing bullets. Worse than you could possibly imagine. And then you got to feel that emotion, right? And then you look at, oh yeah, it must have been really bad. Now that's your identity now. That's your identity.
And so the more you hold on to that identity of the past, the harder it is to become who you want to be in the future.
Well, here's to answer the other part of your question when we started talking. How do you get that person out of their past?
Yeah.
Well, we need a week. It's not going to happen.
You mean it doesn't happen overnight?
No, I want them to come right up against their fear. I want them to come right up against their doubt. I want them to come up against the point where they're going to give up and quit. And they're going to sit there and nobody else is giving up and quitting. And they're going to go all in more, and they're going to start believing that there's something on the other side of that emotion. They're going to believe that there's something past the story of their past, because they're stretching themselves out of the known. And it takes a tremendous amount of awareness, repetition, information, model building, sharing, understanding, experiencing, to finally have a person get to the point where they just let go. And when they do, the body's liberated from the past, and there's a release of energy. And we now know that there's a formula to teach people how to do that. In fact, we're getting so good at it that the first 2 days, a day and a half sometimes, 1 day in certain groups of a week-long event, is about retiring that past, finishing it. You know, this is when the story ends. This is when they get over it. Now, the next 5 days, the person's ready to create a new future. And they're not going to have a problem teaching their body what it feels like to be in love with life, to feel like all their needs are met, that they're free. They are going to fall in love with it, and they are going to begin to signal new genes. They're going to begin to change the brain circuitry, the brain chemistry, their immune system, their gene expression, the telomeres. It's all going to happen. They're more of that future self, and they're headed to a future. Now, here's the deal, though. You got to be able to sustain that state when you return back to your life. That's the name of the game. You got to be able to, you got to bring the game into your life now, and no person, no circumstance, no condition in your life would cause you to feel the old way again. Because the moment you started feeling victimized, the moment you started feeling angry, you just returned to the old self. You disconnected from the energy of your future, and you're back to the energy of your past. Don't expect anything to change in your life. And if you say to me, well, it was because of that person, I'd say, you're back to the unconscious program of believing that your outer world is controlling your inner world. Now, the moment the person starts creating effects in their life and they start having those synchronicities and serendipities, now all of a sudden, they're going to realize what they're doing inside of them is producing an effect outside of them. And they're going to say, oh my God, I'm more of the creator of my life and the less of the victim I am of my life. And I wouldn't create getting that health condition because I'm creating everything in my life. And now they're not victims. And so it's not something you get in one bite. If you could just trade fear and frustration and resentment and suffering for an elevated emotion and truly open your heart again and practice doing that, you'll heal.
You'll heal.
You'll heal because, I mean, all healings happen in the heart. And we've seen some really incredible moments in the last year where people that were traumatized from childhood, that were abused sexually, physically, emotionally, that were suicidal, that had all kinds of health conditions, they came to the edge of that emotion that kept them connected to the past. And they were ready to give up in one meditation because they never had felt an emotion like this that they could remember, that it was so intense. And they thought about all the times for the last year that they never missed a day of doing a meditation, even when they didn't feel like it, or when they wanted to quit halfway through and they didn't, they went all the way. They thought about all those times that they went to that point and they went one more time.
Really?
And their words are always the same. And my heart blew wide open. And I look back at my entire past, and I don't want to change one thing in my past because it brought me to this present moment. And I can see my betrayers. I could see the people in my life that had a hand in this. And I have nothing but compassion for them because now the person is no longer viewing that past from the same level of consciousness. They're viewing it from a place of love, of wholeness. And they see the greater good of all of it. And now their conditions, their health conditions, their endometriosis, their uterine tumors, I mean, whatever it is, literally disappears, and they have an incredible change in their brain chemistry. They're in love with life. They're off their meds. They're not suicidal. Why would they be? They're free. So it can happen in an instant when the heart is healed, and everybody gets the new signal. The body's out of the past. The body's no longer feeling the emotions of the past. And sometimes we got to come right up against that edge. That's the great moment.